If you told me a year ago that I'd fall for a guy the first met through a car accident, I'd have laughed in your face. But that's exactly what happened. It was late October, and I was driving home from my sister's place after a long, awkward dinner. I remember it was raining, hard enough that the wipers were struggling, and I was in a crap mood, already dreading the lonely Friday night I had ahead of me. The light turned green, and I started through the intersection. That's when it happened. A silver truck blew through the red and clipped the back end of my car. The sound was awful. Metal on metal, tires screeching, glass somewhere behind me shattering. My little Honda spun out, tapped the curb, and came to a shaky stop. I sat there for a few seconds, stunned, my hands locked on the wheel, heart racing. Then I saw him, tall, soaked, running up to my window with his hands raised like I was some wounded animal. "Are you okay?" he yelled through the glass. I rolled down the window, still catching my breath. "Yeah, I think." "What the hell was that?" He winced. "That was me. I'm so sorry. I didn't see the light change." "Of course you didn't," I thought. But I just nodded and started to open the door. We stood there in the rain, both of us dripping and awkward. His hoodie was plastered to his chest, and his hair was dark and wet, sticking to his forehead. He looked a little younger than me, maybe mid-20s, and genuinely freaked out. "I wasn't texting or anything," he said quickly. "I swear, it was the rain. I was late getting off work, and I wasn't paying enough attention." I know that's not an excuse. I didn't say anything right away, just took a breath and looked at the damage. The back bumper of my car was pretty wrecked, but the frame looked okay. His truck barely had a dent. "Do you have insurance?" I asked. "Yeah," he nodded. "Of course. Let me grab it." He jogged back to his truck, and I watched him, trying to slow down my pulse. That's when I realized I wasn't angry. Not really. I mean, yeah, it sucked, but something about the way he looked at me, genuinely worried, soaked to the bone, apologizing before I even had a chance to yell, softened something in me. He came back with his wallet, hands shaking a little as he fumbled with his ID and insurance card. I took them and snapped photos with my phone. "Name's Eli," he said after a pause. "I'm really sorry." "I'm Josh," I replied. "And it's okay, could have been worse." He exhaled, clearly relieved I wasn't screaming at him. Then, weirdly, we just stood there for a minute. In the rain, neither of us moving. Finally, he said, "Do you need a ride or anything? I can wait with you if you're calling someone." I shook my head. "Nah, I'm good. Just need to calm down a bit before I drive." He nodded slowly. "Okay. Still, I'm really sorry." I almost left it at that. But then, without really thinking, I asked, "Where do you work?" He blinked. Trader Joe's." "On Jefferson." "Grocery or stock?" "Stock. Nights, mostly." "Why?" I shrugged. "Just wondering. You seem like you mean it. The apology." He gave a small, sheepish smile. "I do. I've never hit anyone before. First time for everything, I guess." That made him laugh. Just a short, nervous burst, but it made me smile too. We exchanged numbers, just in case insurance needed more info. I drove home with a busted bumper, soaked jeans, and a weird flutter in my chest I couldn't explain. I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again, but 3 days later, I got a text. "Eli, hey, hope everything's okay with your car. Also, I still feel bad. Can I buy you coffee or something?" I stared at the message for a solid minute, then typed back, "Me. Sure. You owe me one for the stress. Eli." Fair. "Me Thursday?" Eli. Deal. That's how it started. We met at a tiny coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a locksmith, the kind of place with mismatched mugs and local art taped to the walls. I got there first, grabbed a table by the window, and kept checking the door like some nervous teenager on a first date. Eli showed up 5 minutes late, still in his work hoodie, hair damp like he'd just showered. He looked a little anxious when he spotted me, but then he smiled, and something in my chest eased up. "Hey," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You came." I said I would. He laughed lightly, then looked down at his hands. "I've been overthinking this for 2 days. Like, how do you ask someone out when the way you met was by smashing into their car?" I smirked. "Is that what this is? You asking me out?" His eyes flicked up to mine, startled, but not embarrassed. "Maybe. I mean, if you're not totally freaked out by me." I wasn't, and he could probably tell. "I guess it's not the worst meet cute," I said. "Definitely memorable. He ordered us coffees. Black for him, oat latte for me, and we talked. At first, it was surface stuff. Work, schedules, weather. But he had this way of talking that felt easy. He didn't rush or try too hard. He listened, actually listened. When I told him I did freelance design work, his eyes lit up. Like logos and websites and stuff? Yeah, mostly for small businesses. Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills. That's so cool. I always thought design people were like, mysterious. You know, the type who stare at typography and judge your font choices. I laughed. Only if you use Comic Sans. He grinned. I deserve that. We sat there for an hour, maybe longer. I kept meaning to check my watch, but I didn't want to. I liked the way his face lit up when he talked about his younger brother, or how he kept wrapping both hands around his mug like it made him feel steadier. At one point, there was a lull in the conversation, and he just looked at me for a beat too long. "What?" I asked, feeling suddenly exposed. He shook his head, almost sheepish. "I'm just glad I texted you. I wasn't sure you'd answer." "I wasn't sure I should." "But you did," I nodded. "Yeah, I did." He bit his lip. "So would it be totally weird if I asked to see you again? Properly, not just a guilt coffee thing." I didn't hesitate. "It wouldn't be weird." "Okay," he said, and that nervous grin came back. "Good." We walked out together, the sun already starting to set, casting everything in that orange glow that makes people look softer. As we stood on the sidewalk, I wasn't sure if we were supposed to hug, or shake hands, or just wave like middle schoolers. He solved that. "Can I give you a hug?" he asked, already stepping in. I nodded, and he wrapped his arms around me, gentle but firm, like he meant it. Like it wasn't a placeholder for something else. We pulled apart slowly. "I'll text you," he said. "You better." And then he turned and walked down the street, hoodie bouncing with each step, hands in his pockets, and head tilted toward the sky like the day had gone better than he expected. I stood there a second longer than I probably should have. Then I got in my car, still dented and scratched, and smiled the whole way home. The next time I saw Eli, it was a Wednesday night. He'd just gotten off work, and I offered to cook dinner at my place. I don't know what possessed me. I'm not exactly a chef, and my apartment was barely more than a one-bedroom with a temperamental stove and a couch that squeaked when you sat on it too fast. But I wanted to impress him, or at least not poison him. He showed up with a six-pack and a bag of salad mix, which made me laugh because I hadn't mentioned anything green in my plan. I figured if you were feeding me, I should at least bring something that made it look like I cared about my arteries, he said. Dinner was pasta, simple. But he said it was great, and I chose to believe him, even though I knew the sauce came from a jar and I'd burned the garlic bread. We ate at the small table near the window, legs brushing every now and then. There was music playing low in the background, one of those indie playlists I always defaulted to when I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard. "You live alone?" he asked between bites. "Yeah. My roommate moved out a few months ago. I kinda like the quiet." He nodded. "I get that. I share a place with 2 other guys. It's chaotic." "You ever think about living alone?" "Sometimes, but then I think I'd just end up talking to myself all day." "Nothing wrong with that." He smiled. "You'd be surprised how annoying I can be when no one's around to keep me in check." Later, we moved to the couch. I poured us each a beer, and we sat side by side, close, but not touching. The movie I had picked played in the background, but neither of us was really watching it. We were talking, softly, slower now, about things that weren't just small talk. He told me about growing up with a single mom, about how he'd started working as soon as he turned 16, about his plans to maybe go back to school someday, once things settled down. "I feel like I'm always running behind," he said. "Like everyone else is on some track and I'm just winging it." I nodded. "I feel that way too, more than I'd like to admit." There was a pause, then he looked over at me. "You ever think you're where you're supposed to be?" That question sat between us for a while. "Sometimes," I said eventually. "Like, moments. Flashes. Never all the time." "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." We didn't say anything for a bit. Then, somehow, I felt his hand brush against mine, just barely, like he wasn't sure if it was okay. I turned mine over slowly, palm up, and he let his fingers slip into mine. No rush, no tension, just his hand in mine. The movie kept playing. We didn't move. And then he said, so softly I almost didn't catch it, "This feels good." I looked at him. "Yeah," I said, "it does." And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about where this would go, or how it might fall apart, or if I was reading it wrong. I was just there, with him. The shift between us wasn't sudden. It didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like quietly stepping through a door that had been open the whole time. Over the next couple weeks, Eli started showing up more often. Sometimes with Thai takeout. Sometimes just to hang out and sit in silence. Both of us on our phones, legs tangled under a shared blanket. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was how he'd kick off his shoes the second he walked in. How he'd sit on my counter while I made coffee. How his toothbrush ended up next to mine without us talking about it. One Friday night, after a long week of deadlines and client revisions, I texted him, "Rough day. "Want to come over?" He just sent back, "Already on my way." When he showed up, he looked exhausted, hair tousled, hoodie rumpled, but he smiled when he saw me. That smile did something to me. It always did. He dropped his bag by the door and walked straight over, wrapping his arms around me without saying a word. I buried my face in his neck and just stood there, breathing him in. We didn't talk much that night. We ordered pizza, watched half of a movie we'd both seen before, and lay on the couch like two puzzle pieces that had finally figured out how to fit. At one point, I turned to him and asked, "You doing okay?" He hesitated. "Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, like this isn't real." I nodded. "Me too." He turned to face me fully, our legs still tangled. "Why?" "Because it's been easy, and I'm not used to easy." He stared at me for a second, then leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "Can I tell you something kind of dumb?" "Always. I was scared to text you after the accident. I thought you'd just block me." "Why didn't you?" "Because when I looked in your eyes that night, you didn't look mad. You looked tired. Like you'd seen worse and just didn't want to deal with more." I blinked, caught off guard. That's probably true. "I wanted to make you smile, even if it was just once." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't our first kiss. That had happened the week before. Late night, both of us a little buzzed, a little too close on the couch. But this one felt different, softer, less about momentum and more about meaning. His hand cradled my jaw, thumb brushing lightly against my cheek. My fingers curled into the hem of his hoodie, pulling him closer. We stayed like that for a while, just kissing, not rushing, not needing anything more than the weight of each other. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes searched mine. "You make me feel like I don't have to pretend," he whispered. "You don't." We lay back down, his head on my chest, my fingers tracing slow circles on his back. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old couch. "I could fall for you," he said, voice muffled. I didn't answer right away. But eventually I whispered, "I already am." He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The first time he stayed the night, it wasn't planned. We'd had a lazy Sunday, brunch, a trip to the farmer's market, then back to my place with bags full of vegetables neither of us had any clue what to do with. I made a joke about learning how to roast fennel and he groaned, "That sounds like a punishment." By the time it got dark, he was curled up next to me on the couch, half asleep with his head in my lap while some crime docuseries murmured in the background. "You should go home before you pass out," I said, running my fingers through his hair. He made a noise, somewhere between a grunt and a no, and burrowed closer. "I'll just crash here," he mumbled. "You sure?" He cracked one eye open. "Unless you don't want me to." I didn't say that. "Then yeah, I'm sure." That was it. No toothbrush packed, no overnight bag. He just stayed. He didn't move when I turned off the lights and guided him to bed. He peeled off his jeans, crawled under the covers in his hoodie and briefs, and pulled me down beside him like we'd done this 100 times before. I remember staring at the ceiling in the dark, fully aware of the warmth beside me. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. His hand found mine under the blanket, fingers threading easily together. It was the most peace I'd felt in years. When I woke up the next morning, he was still there, still holding my hand, still breathing slow and deep, like sleep came easy to him in my bed. He stayed the next night too, and the night after that. By the end of the week, there was a spare hoodie in my closet, a phone charger on my nightstand that wasn't mine, and an extra toothbrush next to mine in the cup by the sink. It all happened slowly, quietly, like the way he started doing the dishes after dinner without being asked, or the way he'd grab my coffee order without checking, because he already knew it, or how he'd sit at my desk while I worked, watching YouTube videos with one earbud in and humming along off-key. There wasn't a moment where we sat down and defined anything. But one night, as we brushed our teeth side by side, he turned to me and said, "So, do you tell people I'm your boyfriend yet?" I nearly choked on my toothpaste. He was grinning, foam at the corners of his mouth. I spit and rinsed before answering. "Only when I'm trying to sound impressive." "Good," he said. "Because I've been telling people." "You have?" "Mm-hmm," he said, wiping his mouth with a towel. "Even my mom." "Seriously?" She said, "Finally." That stopped me. "She knew?" I asked. "She always knew, just like I always kinda knew." "Knew what?" "That if I was ever gonna fall for someone," he said, turning serious now, "it was gonna be someone like you." There were a lot of things I could have said in that moment, but I didn't. I just pulled him in and kissed him, long and slow, like we had all the time in the world. Because maybe we did. We never said "I love you" in a rush. It hung there between us for a while, something unspoken but real, like a song we both knew the lyrics to but weren't ready to sing out loud. Then one night, it just slipped out. We were in the kitchen, of all places. Eli was frying eggs at midnight because he couldn't sleep and claimed they helped reset his brain. I was sitting on the counter, half asleep, watching him shuffle around barefoot in a t-shirt and boxers, hair sticking up at the back. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled at me like I was something he was still surprised to see in his space. "You look dead," he said. "I feel dead. Want an egg?" "I'll pass." He turned back to the stove, humming some tune he'd picked up from TikTok, and that's when it hit me. I loved him. I loved the way he stood, always slightly leaning to one side. The way he overcooked his eggs but still acted like Gordon Ramsay. The way he knew when to talk and when to just sit next to me and let the silence do the work. And so, without thinking, I said it. "I love you." He froze, just for a second. Then he turned slowly, spatula still in hand. "What?" I blinked. Yeah. I didn't mean to say it like that, or now. His face broke into the softest smile I'd ever seen on him. "I love you too," he said, almost laughing. "I've been sitting on that for weeks. Thought I'd scare you off if I said it first." "You couldn't scare me off. Challenge accepted. He put the spatula down and walked over to me, settling between my knees, hands on my thighs. Say it again, he said. I love you. He kissed me, eggs forgotten, skillet still sizzling on the stove. We laughed about it later, lying in bed, the room smelling faintly of burnt butter. I think I might be terrible at this, I said. Relationships. He traced lazy circles on my chest with his finger. You're not. I don't always know what I'm doing. Neither do I. I'm scared sometimes of messing this up. He looked at me then. Really looked. Me too. Cool, I said. So we'll mess it up together. He nodded, lips brushing my shoulder. Deal. From that night on, it was different. Not dramatic or overwhelming, just steadier, like naming it gave us permission to really be in it. To start building something real. He started staying over more often than not. Eventually, his name ended up on my lease. And one night, after he fell asleep on the couch with his head in my lap, I found myself staring down at him and thinking, this is home now. Not the apartment, not the couch. Him. The first time he brought me to meet his mom, I was terrified. It wasn't that she was intimidating. She was warm, short, wore big glasses, and smelled like lavender lotion. She hugged me the second we walked in the door, like I was someone she already knew. But still, something about being introduced felt like a line had been crossed. Like we were official in a way that even saying I love you hadn't quite made real. We sat around her tiny kitchen table drinking coffee that tasted like it had been brewed with motor oil, and she told me embarrassing stories about Eli's childhood while he groaned beside me and begged her to stop. You should have seen the dance he did when he got his first Pokemon card, she said, eyes sparkling. Thought he was gonna explode. I smiled, but I watched him closely. How relaxed he was. How easily he let her love him. It made me ache a little, in the best way. After dinner, when we were driving home, I said, your mom's awesome. She liked you, he said, smirking. Yeah? She told me in the kitchen. Said you're grounded. I think that's her way of saying, not an idiot. I'll take it. He reached over and took my hand as we drove, something he didn't used to do, something that used to feel like too much. Now, it felt like not enough. A few weeks later, my lease was up for renewal. Eli had already half moved in by accident. His stuff in my drawers, his shoes by the door, his scent on my pillow. I brought it up one night while we were folding laundry. So, I'm not renewing. He paused mid-fold. No? Nope, because I'm moving. He frowned, confused. Where? I tossed a rolled-up pair of socks at his chest. Here, we're renewing. Together. His whole face changed, like something behind his eyes just softened. You serious? Dead serious. He dropped the laundry and walked over, arms wrapping around me from behind, chin on my shoulder. I was hoping you'd say that. The months that followed weren't always easy. We fought sometimes. About dishes, about laundry, about dumb stuff that felt big in the moment but wasn't. Once I snapped at him because he forgot to pick up the takeout I'd ordered after a 12-hour workday. He apologized, quiet and tense, and we spent the rest of the night not talking. But later, I found him on the couch with his hoodie pulled over his head, eyes red, and I sat beside him, pressing my shoulder to his until he leaned into me. I don't want to fight with you, he said. Me either. I just want us to work. We will, I said, even when it's messy. We will. One Saturday, almost a year after the accident, we passed by the intersection where we'd met. The light was red, and we stopped at the same spot. He looked over at me, hand resting on my thigh. Still think about that day, he said. I glanced over. Yeah? Every time I drive through here. Still can't believe I hit you. I smiled. Best collision of my life. He laughed, leaned over, and kissed my cheek just as the light turned green. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I looked over at him, his eyes half-lidded, his chest rising and falling under the blankets, that soft, quiet peace he always seemed to find just before sleep. You awake? I asked. He grunted. I'm glad you hit me. He opened one eye, smirking. That's a weird pillow talk line. I mean it. He rolled over, facing me fully. Me too. That day changed everything. Then, softer, you changed everything. I reached for him, pulled him close until his head was tucked under my chin. We fell asleep like that. Like always. Like home.